Hello, welcome to Revive and Rise. I'm your host, Melody Parrish, and we have a special guest, Sally Raymond. She is a psychotherapist, an author, a speaker, so many talents to offer the world. Her book is The Son I Knew Too Late, and it's available on Amazon. And I want to thank you so much, Sally, for coming and being with us today.
Well, I feel honored, and I was so struck by your story when we spoke earlier, and I just feel so blessed to know you and see what you're doing in the world, and I really appreciate this opportunity. Absolutely. Um, yeah, I think I might be a psychotherapist. I've been a psychotherapist now for over 34 years. I've had over 30,000 sessions and I've lost no one. But the saddest part of my whole experience is that before I became a psychotherapist, I became a mom. And I really believe that becoming a mom was the beginning of my true education. And believe me, it wasn't, it was, a lot of it was not planned and certainly against my will. But I had two little boys when I was 25 and 26. I had them right one after the other because I thought I'd lose my nerve if I didn't. And so I had these two little tiny boys. And not long after that, I became a single parent, which was hard, but my kids were just amazing. They were too amazing. I don't know how lucky a person can get, but I felt like I won the lottery. My eldest, however, was just too smart. At 2 years old, I was driving past a gas station and I heard from the car seat, I heard him go, ta x co. And I was like, oh God.
Oh wow, he could read already.
He read it too. And I was like, oh my God. I was a C student in high school. I can't deal with this. I mean, I thought he was crazy, but it turned out he was just smart. And it was the worst moment of my life because I was like, how do I raise a child who's so much smarter than I am? And it's like, oh no. And I also thought, well, that's it, boy. No more Sesame Street for you. I didn't teach you. And so that was my eldest. And at 7, he was giving me 45-minute debates on why he didn't need to make his bed. And he was winning. And wow. I was like, I know this is only going to get worse. And so I had to do something crazy. I had to do something to try to stay the mom of this little upstart. And so I realized I had to go back to school. And I had been a C student in high school and I didn't care about studies. And I was like, I can't, he never got a B. And so I had to, rise and be someone he respected. So I couldn't get a B either. I got one right away. I got when I came back from my first classes, 2 classes at night, because I was working full time. I had a B+ and an A+, and I was thrilled out of my head. I was absolutely stunned. I'd never gotten an A+ before, and a B+ was extremely good. And I walked in, and my son was there, and I said, "You won't believe what I got. I got an A+ and a B+." And he looked at me like I died, and he went, You got a B? And I ended up in the fetal position on the couch while he danced around the coffee table in front of me singing, Mom is a bee. And I was like, I'm not a bee. I realized I couldn't let him do that to me again. I mean, I couldn't. I was going to end up under the fig tree in the homeless section of Santa Barbara, and he was going to take over as head of household because he was just that smart. And I was like, I can't get another B. And so I didn't, not because I was smart, but because I was afraid of him, his opinion of me, because I had to stay calm. I had to be someone he respected and would listen to. And if I got a B, that was going to be gone. And so, just because of him, I ended up graduating with highest honors at UCSB. But meanwhile, at 14, he was already at the university in calculus. Yeah. Not anything I did. He just handed me a piece of paper and said, sign here. And I said, what is this? And he said, I'm going to be at the university taking calculus.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh my God, and I signed it. And because I had to, he sort of had me he ambushed me. And he ended up taking 3/4 of calculus, and he got the top grade of 250 regular college students every quarter. He got the top grade in the class, and he was inventing new proofs.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I know, but I mean, how do you can't compete with that, and then at 15, he was teaching calculus at the high schools. And at 16, he was invited by Carnegie Mellon into a special accelerated program in theoretical math, along with 32 other brilliant, by invitation only, world-class kids. And in 4 years, he finished both his bachelor's and master's.
Oh,
and
wow.
And he was the only one left of his whole class of 32. There were 33 original entrants, and he was the only one left. Everyone else crashed and burned and was no longer in the program because it was too hard. And he was the only graduate to walk and get his bachelor's and master's in theoretical math. And he was so angry because he had watched all of his what would have been his colleagues, one by one, lose ground and fail out. And that was not okay with him. He was furious with the requirements that Carnegie Mellon had imposed that made it so impossible for 32 out of 33 brilliant kids to fail out. And all the money that those parents paid for nothing. And it was a real horrible thing. And he had tremendous survival guilt for that he was the only one left. And but that wasn't all. I mean, and a year later, I was just getting my licensure as a psychotherapist when he committed suicide. And that was the end of this mother. I was obliterated. There was no mother left, but I'd just gotten trained as a psychotherapist with the skills and training I'd never had before. And I had to find out what I missed. I had to go back and I had to find out what I missed. And I couldn't let it go. I couldn't not do it. And so I started this retrospective, and with the new insights I had, I found the stories I never understood before. or even knew sometimes. And I found, a total of, I wrote up a total of 99 stories that had happened to him that, from his point of view, would have really sabotaged his progress and made him feel, really bad and hopeless about his future. And here's a kid that had done what nobody else could do. He was the most incredible success I've ever seen. And when he walked away from Carnegie Mellon with his 2 degrees, I just saw the most magnificent young man ever. I mean, he was brilliant. He was absolutely stunning. And a year later, he was dead.
Wow.
And we all crashed and burned. But in the meantime, ever since, I've been putting together the stories that I had to find out the hard way, that nobody wants to find out the hard way. And none of them have died with him. They're all alive. These are living stories. They're happening to young people every day. And I couldn't be his mother or a psychotherapist unless I wrote the stories up in a way that would help other people survive what he and we didn't. And that took 28 years because it had to be good. It had to work. It had to honor him in a way that would actually help other people. And so it was a big ask. And so it took forever, and I didn't give myself time off. But it's on Amazon now. It's called The Son I Knew Too Late, A Guide to Help You Survive and Thrive. And that's my promise to the readers, is it will. It really will help you survive and thrive. And so he was my teacher. He was the person who forced me to become what I never would have become without him. I would never have had to go on to school, then go back and get straight A's because he did, and he forced me. He forced me to become something I would never be. And I feel like he's still here. And he taught me through his life and his circumstances and what happened, what's wrong with society, what's wrong going wrong under the radar that we don't know. And so now I feel like I have a lot of information found the most difficult way possible that we all need to know because we're getting it wrong in a lot of ways. And one of the things there's so many, there's like 8 or 9 major things that we're doing wrong. And I've written them down and I'm working on that because we need to rewrite what's this society and what works for life. And one of them is that back in the industrial age, we stopped teaching social emotional skills in schools to prioritize industrialization and STEM classes, for technology and for science. And those are great, but they sacrifice learning how to speak, learning how to be effective, learning how to regulate your emotions, learning how to get along with other people, learning how to read body language, learning all these skills that are called, they're under the rubric of EQ or emotional intelligence. But we've been teaching IQ, which is, it's all content, but it isn't going to teach you how to live. It's not going to teach you how to be happy. It's not going to teach you how to be successful.
Right.
EQ does. EQ predicts for success and happiness, but IQ doesn't. And it's independent, has no relationship. And so that's what we're missing in schools. So for the last 21 years, I'm invited into high schools to teach classes by the teacher. The teacher asks me to teach classes in social emotional skill building. And I do. And I tell you, Melody, I walk in and I see a sea of dead, bored eyes. And 8 weeks later, you can't believe the fire in those eyes, and all the hands are raising, and they're excited, and they're participating, and they're just, it's just, it's amazing. It's just amazing. And you know that they're learning things that make them feel like they do matter. They can have hope. They can be successful. They can get along. And it's just, it's so addictive. I do it for nothing, Melody, because nothing could pay me enough to just the look in their eyes and what happens in the class is so addictive. and and now the teachers are asking me to do it twice a year because it's too good.
Yeah.
It's just, it works too well. And so I am, but this needs to go nationwide. We need to reboot, what works for humanity, because we're creating a nation of uncaring zombie people who don't have any heart, don't have any soul, aren't connected to each other. And that disconnection is creating evil and cruelty and hate, and it's going to destroy everything that we could be. And I can't tolerate that. And I know my son, if he'd known how to self-regulate his emotions, if he'd learned how to, handle himself and handle life and people better, because he learned all the content, he learned all the IQ stuff, and he was stunningly brilliant. But the emotional part was the part that was missing. And it's being systematically not prioritized in schools, and that's to our destruction, And so that's just one thing, but it's also what's behind the bullying and the evil. And right now, the suicide rate. I heard this, and a young man was giving a speech, and he cited a statistic I had not heard before. He said that now the suicide rate among young people 10 to 33 is the number one cause of their death.
Oh, wow. That's just
suicide is usually, that's crisis. That's incredible crisis when the young people are killing themselves more often than any other method, over accidents or anything else. And usually suicide is at the 11th cause of death. And that's standard, and that has gone on for years and years and years. The 11th most likely cause of death. But for the young right now, it is their number one cause of death. It's never been like that. Yeah. And it's saying our children are losing hope. They're losing life force. They're giving up. Yeah. And that's not acceptable. That means that that's like the canary in the coal mine. They're the ones saying there's something really wrong if we don't want to live.
Yeah.
And we have to wake up, and we have to turn things around and do what we need to do to reboot what works for life. And so I believe that is the job we all have now. I think that is the only job we really have now. And if we don't have that, we have nothing. And our children, if you think a child is no big deal, if you think your child, it doesn't really matter and that you could go on without it, you are so wrong.
Right.
Because when I lost my son, I was obliterated. Because this could not have happened in my life, in my understanding of my world. And I died as a mom. I died. I didn't know my past anymore because it wasn't the story that it couldn't have ended this way. It couldn't have ended with my son committing suicide at all. And so something was very wrong with my understanding of what my experience was. And that meant I didn't know a thing about my own past. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had no life anymore. I had no future. Without him, I felt like I was as dead as he was.
Right.
And the only thing that kept me here was my profession.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
wow. Wow. That, that's so powerful that you talk about the emotional uh, regulation and the emotional intelligence. I was listening to something just yesterday, and it was talking about how we're so disconnected, how young people just want to be on their phones, so they don't understand. They text, they don't talk, and how detrimental that can be to communicate that way.
Absolutely. We get so much more information by being one on one with people. I mean, even this through Zoom, we can see each other, but I can't see your body language. I can't see so much of your communication because our whole body is always speaking, whether we know it or not. The words are just a tiny fraction, and words are linear. The world is holographic. There's 1,000 things going on at any one moment we could pick to choose to talk about, but we can only say one thing at a time. And that leaves out so much. And it also makes the one thing we say so much more important than anything else because we value language.
Yeah.
And yet it's cutting out 99% of what's really going on. So you don't have a balanced picture at all. And it scares everything. And the other problem is our brains, since the beginning of our beginning back in the primeval jungle, our brains, the limbic system, which was the first part of our brain that was operative back then, was geared for anything out of the ordinary, any sound, anything that didn't seem normal, you would get the worst case thought because it was either flight or fight or freeze. And so that's the only part that was operative. And so our brains are wired from the beginning of our experience on Earth to prioritize the first thought, making it the worst possible hypothesis. Now, the brain can't tell what's going on. It doesn't know what's happening. It has no sound. It doesn't hear anything. It doesn't feel anything. It knows nothing about what's going on, but it's always going to give you the worst case thought, the worst possible hypothesis about what something is, because back in the primeval jungle, if you heard a twig snap or a sound somewhere, it could very well be a saber-toothed tiger.
Right.
And you would have to, react instantly. And in order to hopefully be able to survive one way or another. And if so if you didn't think the worst first back then, you're going to be lunch.
Right. Absolutely.
And so the survivors are the ones who reacted really fast to that first worst case thought and somehow made it back to the cave. But anyway, since that beginning, our brain, whatever worked to help us survive, never changed in the brain. So the limbic system is just as the same as it was back then, and the first thought it ever gives you is the worst possible hypothesis, which is always the least nowadays is the least likely. I haven't seen a saber-toothed tiger in my lifetime, and I doubt that I ever will. But the brain that's how it's wired. And so we're set up to think the worst thought first. And if you believe the first thought, you're going to act in ways that are going to be way out of proportion to what's really happening or what's really possible. And that's going to set us up to self-destruct.
Right.
It'll make us overreact to something. So the most important thing we can do these days when our brain gives us the first worst case thought, which it always will, is to just kind of notice it and go, okay, that's the worst possibility.
Mm-hmm.
But what's more likely, or what do I want to have happen? Because whatever you focus on grows. First rule of hypnosis. And so if you focus on the worst case, it's the least likely, but by focusing on it, you can, subtly increase the probability of a worst case event happening. Maybe not that one, but another one, because you're overreacting. You're dramatizing something that is just a hypothesis. It isn't the truth.
Right.
And in life, when you have clouds going by and it's really dark and raining and it's scary, what you do is you get somewhere safe and you hold on.
Mm-hmm.
And you just wait for the cloud to go by so that you can see light again and you know better what to do. And that's what we really need to do, is learn how to calm ourselves down and think that's the first hypothesis. There's a billion others it could be, and you just really don't know. And in time, everything works out. Everything clears up. We figure things out. We learn more about what to do. So the most important thing is to survive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that, yeah. And that's what my son didn't do. He took a worst case moment, and it was a setup from earlier. And I know what exactly it was. I know everything. Well, most everything that I can know. And he acted on it. And he was, and at his memorial, my aunt, who adored him, who was very fierce Italian woman, and she came up and she said, "Did he have to get an A in everything?" And I was like, "Yeah, he got an A in suicide." And I am not impressed, because he had so much to give. He had so much. He would have been a stunning success. He could have gone anywhere and he would have been a success at it. And he would have made such a difference in the world. And so my book is basically trying to salvage what I could about his life and what I've had to learn the hard way, so that he can still make a difference in the world, not the way he would have, but just by being who he was and what happened to him. His story is very powerful. And it's happened, like I said, every one of the stories is alive right now. So if you can know the stories and then know what to do at every age to keep life worth living, you can avoid all this. But there's just like, teaching social emotional skills in school. I watch dead, bored eyes go on fire. They're so excited because they're learning that, they have a way through. They can figure things out, and they have the skills within them to succeed and make a difference and be happy. And that changes the whole algorithm of their lives. Years ago, I was at dinner having at a restaurant, and I had a tap on my shoulder, and I looked around, and this girl looked at me and she said, "I bet you don't remember me." And I said, "Hi, Stacy." She had been one of the students many years before. And she said, "I just wanted to tell you that of all the classes I took in school, yours was by far the best." And that will keep me going for a long time, Melody.
Oh, I bet so. I bet that was very satisfying.
It was so adorable, because her class in particular was unique because it was an at-risk class. These were kids that were identified by the school as having no chance to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
When I walked in, there was that sea of dead eyes, and the teacher introduced me to the class by saying, "These kids will be lucky to get a job at McDonald's." And I was like, what a horrible teacher to say that.
Right.
I was like, you're blaspheming them and trash canning them before they even start.
Yeah.
And I could see why, because the kids didn't care. But when I get started and I talk about what they are going to have to do and all that, things change. And this was a virtual enterprise class where they had to create a fake career, profession, and each one had their own role, whether it was CEO or CFO or whatever. And they had to put things all together and make this, very, very palpable thing. And at the end of the course, they had to go and compete against 103 schools nationwide in Washington, D.C.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and these are the at risk kids. They were competing against gifted and everybody else. And these at risk kids swept 5 of the 7 categories.
Oh, wow.
And when I got back to school, the teacher just said, "This is impossible." And I said, "No, it's not." I said, "If I can do this in 8 weeks, you have no excuse." I said, "This is a failure of your educational system." I was so mad.
Oh, wow.
But it just shows you that these hopeless kids, well, they had all they ever needed, but they needed to know how to use it, how to facilitate themselves and rise above the basal level. And they did, and they really took it seriously, and it was just a joy to watch.
Oh, wow.
But everyone can do that. Anyone can do that. And that would have helped my son so very much because he was the academic king, but social emotionally, he had his friends, he had wonderful friends, but he was fragile.
Right.
And there was reason for that that's in my book. And but you really need to know. I mean, there are Dr. Eric Erickson. He was the father of psychosocial theory back in the 20s and 30s and 40s, and he was a friend of Freud, but he didn't believe in Freud so much, but he created his own thing. But what he did is he analyzed human development from birth on, and he discovered what key issue is alive and critical at what age, because we grow through different ages, and as we grow there's a core inner issue we can't see, we can't hear, we don't have words for, but it's alive in us, and it's critical that that core issue get answered in a way that's positive for life to keep growing and becoming even more and more resilient and powerful. But if the answer to each question falls into the negative, that starts to undermine the next stage and the next and the next. And if you
Right.
don't know what they are, you are flying blind in a snowstorm. You really don't know what you're doing or why. And children need to know this. Everybody needs to know this because they can also help themselves if they do. But we can all learn, like the very first question in life coming out of the womb is, can I trust? Can I trust my caregiver? Does she get me? Does he get me? Does he understand when I'm hurting? Does he help me feel better? Does he feed me when I'm hungry? Does he, can I trust? And if you can't trust your caregiver, you can't trust anything because that's the beginning of all relationships. And so, unfortunately, my own son, that little boy, that little one who came out of me uh, uh, back um, when he was born, he was crying all the time, and I was a new mom, and didn't have any experience with children, and I had a very old, I thought, really seasoned pediatrician who just said it's just colic. It's something that happens with babies. They're born with an immature stomach, and here he gave me some pills and things, and I gave them to my son, and they didn't help. But he cried and cried and cried, and he cried. The doctor said, "Oh, he'll cry for 3 months. It'll be over in 3 months." And so I was up like 30 times a night, and my poor little baby was just miserable, and I didn't know what else to do. I tried everything I could think of. And at 3 months, he was still crying. So I called the pediatrician for the 100th time and said, he's still crying. And the pediatrician said, well, it's probably, maybe it's a 4-month colic or the 5 month. And I'm like, I'm done. I'm just done. And I just hung up on him. And I called around, and some friends recommended another pediatrician. And I took my son to him that very day. And he was examining him. And he took his clothes off, and he was like checking his collarbone. And he said, oh, feel right here. And he was feeling right on this corner, on the collarbone. And I felt there was a lump there. And he said his collarbone was broken in birth.
Oh, wow.
That's what's been hurting him. It wasn't colic.
Wow.
And so every time I picked him up, I hurt him without meaning to.
Right.
Every time he moved, he hurt. And so he learned distrust, and it really showed even when he was like, well, all through his life, if you went up to give him a hug or touch him, he'd back away, he'd shy away. His body would just reflexively pull away because that was his first experience. And, and so that was a real, real problem I didn't recognize. I didn't know what to do about then, and when he was older, I finally told him what happened at birth. And I said, this is why you shy away. And it's, and he said, well, Mom, I'm glad I know where I got it, but what do I do about it? And I said, I was the mom, and I said, I don't know. I mean, all I can say is it's not who you are. It's something that happened to you. It was a tragedy that would never have happened to you if you had been diagnosed correctly, and if I hadn't, believed that darn doctor, And he, but he got that, but he did have that reflex, and that distrust. I now know that if a baby learns distrust in the first stage of life, they are at risk of suicide later on.
Yeah. Wow.
Because they don't. And so that was one huge, huge thing I missed at the very beginning. So I felt like I failed him at the very beginning of his life without ever intending to, but by believing a doctor who was probably more senile than he was seasoned at that point. And so it's really important to really know what the issues are so that you can really address them in a way that you've done your best. Right. And I certainly didn't do my best for my baby, and he's not hearing me. And I can't. It's intolerable.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you've just said like a plethora of things. And as I'm listening to you, it's just amazing. I'm taking it all in. Now, when you, at first, a few moments ago, you talked about the your limbic system, or I've heard it called your reptilian brain. The lower level, the thing, like you said, you talked about how it will always see the negative. And that's true. If you actually think about that and just take a moment, everybody always says it's easier to see the negative in a situation than the positive in everything. If you notice, people always focus on the negative part and don't see the positive part. And you're saying that is part of our brain setup just for survival.
Absolutely. It's the most, that first thought is the most protective if there's really something horrible happening, because the brain can't really tell what's happening. It's just sending out a hypothesis. So it's protective, but it's also at this point the least likely to be true. And we've got to really get that so that we can sit there and bracket that first thought and go, great, good to know, but then not focus on it. Because if you focus on it, that puts us in increased danger to self and others.
Yeah. And a lot of people, as you were saying, as you were speaking, I was thinking a lot of people talk about how it's better to come up with the worst thing possible and be surprised when it doesn't happen rather than have all these high hopes of things and then they don't happen and you're disappointed. But and okay, you can kind of see that on the surface, but if you, like you said, if you just automatically see the worst thing possible, and then it blocks all of the good things that happen, and the fact that it doesn't happen, it's kind of like your mind stays on that. Is that correct?
That's correct. It's very correct. If whatever you focus on becomes all that we've that's gonna be a hypothesis, and we'll only be looking at information that comes in and confirms it. But the it's the least likely to happen. There's no saber-toothed tigers, that we're not in the primeval jungle anymore. And we really have to look at what do we want? And if you keep focused on what your ultimate goals are, what you really want in life, if you focus on that, that too grows.
Right.
And it doesn't happen immediately, usually, but over time it will.
Yeah.
But you have to give it time. You have to give it time. I had a renter years. I have the best renters on earth. I don't know why, but I had this young man who came from Munich, and he was finishing his PhD in. He was a double major in theoretical math and electrical engineering, and his anyway. He was in my son's room, the John's room, and I was amazed because here was this brilliant young man in the same bedroom as my son, who grew up and was a theoretical mathematician. So anyway, his name was Florian, and he's now in Einstein's seat.
Wow.
Yeah. And when we were talking once, he told me he was just such a brilliant young man. He was just unbelievable. And we were talking once, and he said, "You know, I'm not that smart." But he said, "I am unusually determined." And that's what made him such a success. Whenever he made a mistake, he just sat there and got curious. He didn't take it personally. He just sat there and went, not this way. Okay, let me try something else. And he would not give up until he found the right answer. And that's what made him so successful. He didn't take anything personally. He just kept going and looking until he found the answer that he needed. And he didn't give up. He was, and that's what creates success. You just don't give up.
Yeah. And I like that you said that he got curious, because I feel like, as a society, we're kind of stamping out thinking and being curious, because we just hear one thing and we just accept it as law, and we don't try and say, is that really true? Or is that the case? Or is there something different? Is there, even if there's a way to do things and there's a way that people do things, maybe it's not the way you do it. Maybe you can get to the same answer, but a different way. And I feel like we're not, as a society, honoring that. Would you say that's true?
You are so right on. That is so true. We are not honoring our open curiosity. If we just stay open and go, I don't know, and it's okay not to know. And in time, more will come in, and it may change what you know, it may not. But either way, stay open. Stay open, because life is all about change. Nothing stays the same. You're not in diapers anymore. You've learned to take care of yourself. You've learned so many things, and you're going to keep learning and growing if you let it. But you can't take anything and think, this is what it is. Because I guarantee you, down the pipeline in time and space, it won't be. When my son's tragedy was the worst thing that could ever happen to a parent, and it's considered the top stressor, equal in stress to surviving Auschwitz, because you really are ever after you lost a child, you will be in a prison. You will be seeking any sign of him. You will be looking for any piece of hair, any little fabric, any bone, anything, because you love that child, and that is eternal. So you are forever in a concentration camp seeking that child. And that's what I am always doing. And I'll never stop, because that's just what happens. So you really don't, but even though that happened, because I was a professional and I had the tools I never had before, I have found so much out that I couldn't have known any other way than if he had lived and died. And I would give anything to have him back and not know any of this. But I can't do that. But in the meantime, he has taught me, and he continues to teach me every day, because I stay open to what I didn't know. And I think that's what has helped me write a book, make me have some content to tell people. And I think it's in a way, it's in a horrible way, it's the best thing that ever happened to me, because it forced me out of my comfort zone so far out that I have become a very different person as a result. And I have, and I wouldn't want to not know what I know now, because I think it could help others, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah, that's so powerful, and I love what you said, that he teaches you every day, and that's so amazing. That keeps you connected. Um, and you said something to me that when we first met, and it really stuck with me. You said that both of you were entered this world on a journey together
Oh,
for a certain goal. He finished his part, and now you're continuing to both of your goals. And I was just like, so that was the most profound thing that I've heard in a long, long time. So I want to thank you for sharing that.
well, that was actually not something I came to, Melody. That was actually about a month after he died. I was obliterated. I was absolutely, I don't even know how to describe it. But it was a Sunday afternoon, about a month after he died, and I got a cold call from a woman. I don't know how she knew me or anything like that. She just said, "You don't know who I am, but I am a psychic, and I know about your son." And she said, "I have something incredibly important to tell you, but I'm not going to tell you this over the phone. You're going to have to come to my home. I'll give you a free reading, but you have to come." And she lived in Sedona, Arizona, which is many hundreds of miles away from Santa Barbara, California. And I just, I was like, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. And so my boyfriend had to drive me, because I couldn't drive. Couldn't drive. But we drove to Sedona, and she walked me into her home. And my boyfriend said, "I'll see you in an hour," and took off. Um, and she walked me into the living room. She had these giant crystals about 2.5 feet high, each one a different color, one in north, south, east, and west. So she really, that proved to me she really had a spiritual side to her. And we sat in the middle on the ground, on the carpet under, and in the middle of the stones. And she started talking. And she spoke for an hour, but what she told me, this is a month after John died, was just stunning. She just said, what I remember. She said, your son came and did what he needed to do and left. But you and he share the same reason for being on earth. He finished his part. You'll finish the rest. And at the time, I had no idea what she was talking about. But it stuck with me and it gave me hope. It gave me that there might be something in this that that he wasn't done and I wasn't done. And what was really interesting is that when we drove away, my boyfriend picked me up and we left. And he said, I know this woman. And I said, you know her? And he said, yeah, she used to speak on past lives. And she had a lecture in a place we call Ojai, which is about 30, 40 miles away from Santa Barbara. And he said, my girlfriend at the time was Indian and she wanted to go and listen to her. And so he said, I had no interest, but I went, I just took her and I thought I'd just wait until it was over. And he said, I sat way in the back and I scooched down so nobody could see me because he says, I didn't care about the lecture. I just was waiting for my girlfriend to get over with it so to go. And anyway, the woman came out and started speaking and suddenly she stopped speaking and said, you in the back. And he said, well, she couldn't see me, so I knew it couldn't be me, so he didn't do anything. And he said she started talking again and talked some more. And then she said, you in the back again. And again, he said she couldn't see me, so I didn't move. I wasn't going to do anything. And anyway, so she talked some more. And then all of a sudden he saw her. She was standing over him and said, you, get up. And he stood up and she introduced him and said, in a past life, he was an Egyptian pharaoh. And if you saw him, he looked exactly like the bas reliefs you see in the Egyptian tombs. And he has the slanty eyes and the rest of it. And for me, he looked like a Confederate soldier because he came from Meridian, Mississippi. But I really feel like she was really someone who had insight, and perspective in ways most people don't. Anyway, it kind of confirmed that she was really a psychic. And anyway, but in the meantime, what she told me, I now believe is true for every single person on earth. I think whoever we lose, they've done their part. We're here to finish the rest. And I really believe that. I really believe that nobody's here for no reason. We have had our models and then they live and then they die and we go on. And so we're here to finish what they started. And whether they were a negative model or a positive model, they're all it's all information. And if we just listen to and learned about what those things are, well, it'll help us know what to do and what not to do.
Right.
But I don't think people see it that way. And so that was really stunning for me when she said that. But I really believe she was just telling the general truth for all mankind.
Yes, I agree. That sounds amazing. And what an amazing experience you must have had.
Well, there's been a number. I mean, because I've stayed open to him, I can never say goodbye to him. I look for him in all ways. And because I do, things show up that a lot of people would miss, and I've had so many things happen. Can I give you one quick story?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. that same boyfriend, after my son died and everything, he said, you know, you need to get out of Santa Barbara. We need to, I need to take you someplace. And so he flew me, we went to Hawaii. He took me to Hawaii. And we were in Hawaii and it was beautiful and I was miserable. And he said, you know, we really should go to, we were in Maui, and he said, let's go to Hana. It's really beautiful in Hana. It's really, and it was Mother's Day, the worst day of my life, you know, after losing my son. And he was like, I'm going to drive you to Hana because it's the most beautiful place in all of Maui and blah, blah, blah. And it's supposed to be, it's a hard road. It's a hard place to get to. It's a rocky road and you have to go way, way far away on the other side of the island. And so we're going and I'm miserable, just so miserable. And we get there and we're taking this hike. It's a beautiful, incredible hike. And the more beautiful it was, the more miserable I felt. On Mother's Day in Maui after losing my son. And we were hiking along and we ended up going and swimming in a pool, one of the 7 sacred pools of the kings. And we hiked even further and we found the great waterfall, and it was really beautiful. And I had a pair of earrings on that really mattered to me. I bought them and they really felt like definitely my most precious earrings ever. And we got to the great waterfall. It was about a 4-hour hike and we were coming back and I noticed one of my earrings was gone. And on Mother's Day in Maui, losing an earring on top of losing my son just finished it for me. I was just a mess. And he was like, oh, it's a gift to the Maui gods. And I was like, typical man does not get it, you know.
Yeah.
And I was just destroyed, just disgusted and destroyed. And we got back and we finally got back to Santa Barbara and I put that earring in my jewelry box. And 6 months later, we went back to Maui with my only remaining son now and my surrogate son, another young man who was a renter who had become family for me. And he took his daughter and her boyfriend, and we all went back to Maui. And, you know, he said, well, we're going to go to Hana. Let's take them all to Hana. You know, they got to see this. And I was like, yeah, that's where my earring is, you know, in the middle of a tropical rainforest. You know, and we're taking them and they're showing them and we're walking the same walk we took all the way. And all I'm thinking, my earring is here somewhere. And I am just like, oh, you know, that earring meant so much to me. And I was like, it probably fell off in the pool and it's over all the waterfalls. It's in the ocean. I'll never see it. Or if it fell off on the path, you know, it probably fell into a rock or a crevice in a rock, and and it rains like hundreds of inches a year there. So it probably is rained into a rock or a crevice, and there's leaves over it. I'll never see it. And just as I was thinking that, I was walking over a rock with a crevice, leaves, and a hook. I picked up my earring.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Wow.
And my boyfriend was behind me and he just yelled, that's incredible. And I was just standing there looking at my earring.
Mm-hmm.
I can't find my earring in my bedroom. How do I find an earring in a tropical rainforest on a 4-hour hike?
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't think the Maui gods gave it back. I really thought, this must be John. And I thought, if I can find an earring in a tropical rainforest after 6 months, there must be hope. There must be hope. And that hope is what started the book.
Oh, wow. Wow. What a wonderful story. And it's a wonderful way to stay connected, you know, to always stay connected. like you said, look for the person in everything. And I love the fact that you took something so tragic and turned it into something so beautiful and so good. And you're helping so many people that you can see and those you can't see.
Well, I feel like he was my teacher, and I better get the teaching, and I better be part of the solution, because otherwise I don't have any reason for being here either. You know, if I'm not a part of the solution, I don't know what I am.
Yeah.
But every single person on earth is a teacher in some way. I had an uncle. He was the most miserable man on earth. He was married to a dominatrix. My aunt was a dominatrix, and oh, good God, he was in misery. He was, but she was also the best cook in Santa Barbara, and he was French, and he loved eating. He loved eating more than any, so he could never leave her. But he was miserable. He was, and he, it was just so sad to see how a man could end up in life making all the wrong choices ultimately because of an addiction to food, and be absolutely miserable. And because it was, as soon as he approached the end of his life, he became even more despairing and more miserable. And he was just, and I just thought, he'd made all these choices and they had not worked out for him. And he was the most miserable man on earth. And that's how he died, you know. And
Yeah.
and I also have an aunt who was had, married the man, the husband, the love of her life. And they lived together until he died a very untimely death. And that was hard for her, but she went back to school. She had three beautiful children that she taught music to. She became a teacher at here in Santa Barbara and taught for 35 years, and then was busy tutoring kids at her home after that for so long. And she's just the exact opposite. She's lived in a way that she's like revered by everyone, and young people flock to her because she's so wise and so kind. And she just knows, and she's going to die. She's 99 now, and she's still incredible. And you just can't help it. People they see the beauty in her, and that it's eternal. And she's lived a life that she has made mistakes. She's also grown and learned and become, and she's lived a life of worth. And we can choose that. We can choose to be despairing and bitter. We can choose to be, something that makes you proud and makes you realize that when I die, I'll feel fine.
Yeah.
You're going to be at peace because you're looking back and seeing, that your life was worth living.
Right.
Uncle Jerry, he did not feel the same way. So sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I mean, I really believe that, I saw John did nothing wrong. He did too well. And but he was really very, very naive, and he was too young. He should have had counseling. He should have had some real help along the way. But if we had just taught them the skills that they have within them already, I'm sure we wouldn't be losing anything like these kids, what we are. And we also have to look at the world we're creating. We're allowing bullies to run rampant in school and do terrible things that end up making kids kill themselves. Why are we allowing that?
Yeah.
Why? We're only going to become terrible people as adults. And
Yeah.
you want to grow that kind of person in the world and say that's okay? No, it's not. But we aren't being effective, and we have to be effective.
Yeah.
If we're not effective, they're running. The kids are running us,
Right.
and it's a recipe for complete disaster. But there's so many other things that happen that my son has taught me. So I just feel like, there's a lot to learn, there's a lot to grow in, but I'm staying open to him and to what I can find out and what I can contribute.
Yeah.
And I know you are on a story similar. You're on a similar story because you too have gone through difficulties, incredible difficulties, and you have learned and you have grown and you have become because of them. And you wouldn't be who you are without all that has happened to you and all you've overcome. And you too are an incredible triumph. And I believe that it is the difficulties that define us. You know, it we define what happens to us. They don't. Nothing that happens to us defines us. It's what we do with it that makes it either good or bad. And you're certainly doing that, Melody, in every way I can see. And so that's the truth.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I do want to ask you because you're talking. We've talked so much about your son, and then the tragic time after that you had, and now to look at you, I would never think, that you had such a tragic moment in your life. And I feel like that's how a lot of people are. But, when you're in that low point, can you give us some tips or techniques to get out? Because a lot of people say, you know, the harshest thing, you got to grab yourself by the bootstraps and get out. But some people just don't know how. Like they're so far down, they don't know how to climb up. So, what can you share with us about that?
That was a huge thing, saving my own life. I didn't want to live. It was too painful. And but I couldn't leave because I had his little brother, and who had also taken a huge hit, losing his eldest brother. And I couldn't do that. I couldn't, and even though I wanted to, I really did. But then trying to save my own life was the next thing because that child he's still within you, he's still part of you. And so I had a lot of medical emergencies. I had precancerous conditions and all kinds of things where I had to basically, save my own life physically and realize why this is why it's happening is that I've taken such a huge physical hit because that, he was part of my body. He came out of my body, but he was still 100% part of my body, even though he looked separate. And I didn't realize that. Now I do. And so, and he didn't come to destroy us. I mean, our children don't come, nobody comes on earth to destroy us. They come to, give us joy and triumph and happiness and pleasure. And I knew this would not serve him, that he would not want that. Even though he didn't know that he innocently created a situation where basically the whole galaxy of humans around him, basically lost stability and crashed and all kinds of things. And I was one of the first, of course. But I knew that wasn't his purpose. That wasn't what he would want or anyone would want. And I knew that for some reason I had to stay because of my other brother, my other son, and because I just knew there must be more. But I lost my job. I was fired. I was told I was incompetent. I had to go on disability. I had to, and I realized I had to put together a whole world. I had to re-put together a whole world. And I had to do it with my bare hands. I had to remodel my house because my house had turned into a mausoleum where every wall, every view I saw, everything I saw was just killing me because it was full of his death. There were pictures, there was memories, it was everywhere. And so I completely took out the garden and started over with it. I completely remodeled the garden and I had to do all the work on my own with my own hands. I I repainted. Became a tile setter. I learned how to tile, and that was really healing. I mean, tiling is really, it was really like putting together a new edifice over what was. It's like building a new world. And so I wanted his life to be a celebration. I wanted my house to be a celebration of his life, not a mausoleum full of his death. And so that is what I did when I was on disability. I just took every single thing I could and turned it into something that was beautiful. And so now the house is full of him in a positive way. And that helps me because your house is your body. You know, your house is your body. And so I had to heal my body. I had to heal my house, and I had to, get my licensure, and because I was halfway there, and I had to study for that, and that was really hard, because I was full of grief and I was in pain, and then I had to find out what happened to him. I had to look at every single thing and really grieve what I didn't know, and then I had to find a way to make it all be of use to others because I knew that would be part of his legacy. And so it was like I had to do all of that. And my friends left me because they were therapists too, and they couldn't bear the pain. And but it was really funny because as many people who left and disappeared on me, angels would come in. They just would show up. I wouldn't even know how or where. They would just show up and they could handle what my friends couldn't. And God bless them. I didn't blame them a bit, but it was really hard to be so alone. But at the same time, angels would show up and that would sustain me in positive ways. And, you know, I realized that when people leave, it's not a negative. It's like some people have done what they needed to do and they leave. But that doesn't mean you're alone, ever alone, because others will show up. You just have to wait and know that they will. And if you know they will, you'll see them when they show up. But if you don't know they will, you might miss them. So just keep open, keep hopeful. And little by little, my life began to come back together and I was seeing clients, and and the more I could help them, the more it felt like I was being of use. I mattered. I had a life. I could create something that was worthwhile. And I was working on my book, and it all worked out to sustain me. But I had to go through the grief. I'm still going through the grief. I'm never going to stop. There's never going to be an end to this. But it's not the end. It's just the fodder that grows us the hardest way possible. And it's never a bad thing in and of itself. It's just what is. You deal with it, you feel it, you allow it, all of it. So you understand it all from as best you can. And then in time, you'll see where you can put this to use. You can see that it isn't bad in and of itself. You're going to make something out of it that is going to be beautiful and not totally worth what you lost, but a gift in a different way.
Wow. Wow, that's just beautiful, Sally. I really appreciate you saying that because that's just amazing.
Well, nothing's worth killing yourself for. I wish I could have told him that. I didn't get the chance, but I have saved other people's lives, and it's been. I'm really honored that they're here, and to see them blooming and see their growth, I know that, that's the best I can do, you know.
Yeah.
But I certainly learned how important every life is.
Right.
I certainly learned that.
Right.
And yeah.
Right. Absolutely. Well, Sally, I want to thank you so, so much for being with us and sharing your wisdom and your story and your expertise. And you're welcome back anytime. I'd love to keep this conversation going. Um,
I
and
think we should.
I'm going to go now and check out your book because it sounds amazing. And
It is. It is. It's got 4.7 stars on Amazon and amazing reviews. And because it works, it really will work. And
yeah,
I feel like I did do what it's something for him that is very tangible. That is a gift to the world, and that was what was born out of all of this.
right. And then that is The Sun I Knew Too Late. And
Mhm.
it's available on Amazon, right?
On Amazon. That's right. And yeah, and read the reviews. You will not believe them. They're just amazing.
Yeah, well, great. And I just, wow, I'm just blown away. But yeah, I want to thank you so much. I know our listeners have learned so much and you've really helped them. So I want to thank you again.
Well, thank John. It's all his doing.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Without him, there'd be nothing here.
that's true. That's absolutely true. Yes. Well, thank you for
Oh,
joining us today and for listening. And I just want to remind you that you do not have to suffer alone. Take care.
all right.